In today's video, I'm going to break down the most important lessons I've learned as a financial advisor over the past 15 years. As a certified financial planner, I've spent hours upon hours learning how to build the right retirement plans with my clients, but I always find the best lessons come from the relationships you build and, more importantly, the stories people tell. And that's exactly why today I'm going to share with you 3 core retirement regrets from real retirees they wished they'd learned sooner. So let's get into the video. Number 1, it's failing to consider the impact of the death of a spouse. About a year ago, I had a prospect come to me named Mary in a total panic. Her husband had recently died about a month beforehand, and the situation was that he pretty much took care of everything financially, especially the investments. And so Mary had really no idea what was happening in their financial lives because the husband just took care of everything and they didn't have any kind of financial advisor or planner in place, which was fine while her husband was living because he took care of everything and seemingly did a good job. The issue is that he passed away suddenly, and now Mary was left to pick up the pieces, and she had absolutely no idea how to do anything, had no kind of experience or background in investing, and was really just overwhelmed. My first task was just to kind of look at the investments and see what's going on, and so you realize, okay, her husband was what you would kind of call an income investor, and so he had built a portfolio of kind of high income, high dividend paying type stocks and other investments that paid quite a lot of income. The problem was that a lot of those investments were pretty risky and they were really volatile and they didn't necessarily always kick off the same amount of income. And so when she had come to me, it was right after 2022, and that was actually a pretty poor year for markets in general and a lot of the riskier high income type investments. So that was totally freaking her out. Now, I was able to help her kind of unwind the portfolio and get it on solid footing with maybe some less aggressive investments and still help her get the income that she needed. But what I want to emphasize to you guys is how much she regretted not having any kind of a plan lined up before this terrible event had happened. And so what I would say, the lesson for most of you is if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you're doing all of your financial affairs on your own, great, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's only one of you and you have a spouse who is not going to be capable of that, you should have a backup plan in place. So I would strongly suggest start interviewing advisors now. Get comfortable with them. You might even start some type of a working relationship with them, even if you are good at managing your own investments. That way you know, well, if something should happen, at least my significant other is going to be taken care of. The other lesson here is make sure you have everything together in one place so your spouse or even your other family members don't have to go looking through everything for passwords and for account statements and wills and other kinds of documents, and they've got it all there in an orderly manner. You're going to save them a lot of hassle having to chase all of this stuff down. And in the same vein, make sure that your estate documents are up to date, that your wills and trusts and everything else, and beneficiaries on retirement accounts and so on are all as you want them to be. These guys had had a will done more than 15 years before this, and they had never updated it. And unfortunately, their wishes had changed, but they had never updated their will. So they had to actually deal with that too. So don't let this happen to you. Make sure that you've got all of your documents in place, they're updated, they're organized, and you're reviewing them regularly. You're going to save everyone a lot of heartache and trouble by doing that. And now, I just want to mention, these stories are only a small insight into the changes that could impact your retirement, and most retirees are going to leave this video remembering the story, but forget the lesson. And I don't want you to fall into this trap. So to learn more about how you can take control of your retirement and retire on your own terms, click the link below and you can book a complimentary retirement assessment with me. So now back to the video, lesson number 2, and this is actually a personal one as this happened to my own grandmother, and that's regret number 2, not selecting the joint survivor option on a pension. So my grandmother and grandfather were retired, and my grandfather had a pension, and I think it paid about $6,000 a month or so, which is decent, and that easily covered their expenses and then some. So they were able to live pretty well. Now, when my grandfather passed away, suddenly we discovered that they didn't select the joint survivor option. They'd only selected what's called a single life annuity, and what happened was, when he passed away, the pension payments went away and my grandmother was left with nothing. So this significantly impacted her lifestyle, and she went from a lifestyle of, relative comfort to just scraping by, because then she was left with getting 50% of his Social Security and then living off of the remaining assets that they had, which, weren't really that substantial. And so, nobody in our family knew about this, and our grandmother, at the time, she's really upset about it, and she's telling my mom and aunts and uncles, like, hey, we just didn't think about it. We wanted to select the option that had the highest payment, and at the time, they thought they were in a stronger financial footing otherwise than they really ended up being, and so they just didn't realize what a major impact this was going to have. And so this had happened even before I got into the financial planning business, but this has been with me ever since. And so, I can't tell you how many times I've come across a situation where retirees, they have the option for a pension. And what you're going to find is almost always when you have that option, there's some type of joint survivor option that you can pick for payments. And if you're not familiar with what that means, let me give you an example. So if you select a single life annuity, maybe it would mean, I'll just throw out a round number. Maybe you're going to get $2,000 a month for your life. So if you're the pensioner, as long as you're alive, you're going to get that $2,000. And then when you die, it's gone. And that's the option that my grandparents chose. Now, a joint life would be something like, you can select 100% joint life payment. And what they do is they reduce that, because now it's like, it's going to be for 2 people's lives, so maybe it would be $1,700 a month instead of the regular single life. And then they'll have other options. They might say 50% joint life. And so if the regular one started at $2,000 a month, once you pass away, your spouse is going to get $1,000 a month, for example. And a lot of times you'll see 50% and 75% and then 100% joint life options. And so I always push my clients to consider some type of joint life, unless their circumstances just don't warrant that at all. And sometimes that might be the case, but usually I would say at a minimum, take the 50%, but a lot of times the 75% is probably going to be sufficient, because your expenses are going to drop somewhat, and the 75% is going to be a higher payment per month than, say, the 100%. And so, that's kind of a happy medium, generally speaking, but we always run the math and always just consider, what's the best option given their situation. And so you guys need to be thinking that way too. All right, and now we've got number 3, and that's over investing in a dream home for retirement. So this is at my last firm when I was out in Arizona, and we had a couple, Tim and Barb, and they weren't, they were on the lower end of the spectrum as far as how much their net worth was for clients. And they had this idea for their dream home in mind. And so what they did, they built their retirement home up in Flagstaff, which is in northern Arizona. It's a lot cooler up there than the Phoenix area, for those of you that aren't familiar with it. And they did this while they were still working, and they did it while they still had a mortgage on their primary home. And so the plan was get this home built, and then within a couple of years, they're going to retire, sell the home down in Phoenix, which they did have a lot of equity in it, even though there was still a mortgage, there was a lot of equity there. And then they would move up to Flag and, live in their dream home. The problem, however, is that they built way more home than they really needed, and the cost was a lot more than they should have. And we told them this, and we showed them in their retirement plan, but They kind of put their feet down. It was their dream, and their plan was, okay, we get it, but we're going to live up here. We'll do it for 10, 12 years or so, and then we'll sell this place and we'll downsize. What are you going to do? I mean, people are going to do what they want, right? You can only give them the information, kind of, bring a horse to the water, right? So they went ahead and did it, and you start building, and almost immediately, there are cost overruns. They can't get the right cabinets in. They have to go with something else. There's permitting issues. It was crazy. So first of all, it took almost a year longer for them to build than they initially anticipated. Then it was about $100,000 over budget from what they had planned. Fast forward to the end of this project, and they are so disgusted with it that they didn't even want to move in. So first of all, because they spent more, they couldn't retire when they wanted to because it had kind of blown up some of their retirement savings, and the math just simply didn't tie out. Second of all, they just literally were so put off by the entire experience that they never moved in there, and they put the house on the market and just sold it. And so the worst part about it is they actually lost money on the house after the sale. You have to pay commissions and everything else. So not only did they go over budget, but then they actually lost money on the sale of that house. So this completely blew up their regular retirement plan. So what do we have to do? I mean, we had to go in there. We had to redo their retirement plan. They had to work a few years extra. We would completely come up with a new savings plan. And what ended up happening was they ended up, when they retired in Phoenix, they sold their home, which, luckily did have a lot of equity, and they were able to downsize and, take some of those proceeds and then put them in their investment accounts and use that to live off of. This was a huge lesson for them, and a major regret. But unless you're in that position where you really have tens of millions of dollars, you should probably avoid doing something like building your dream home like this, especially if you don't have a lot of room to run with everything else. Now, luckily, things worked out for them. It's not like they were completely broke or anything, but it completely upended their retirement plans. So it's a big lesson. Now, before we wrap up, I want you to know that retirement isn't a linear path with linear milestones or even regrets. It takes time to work towards the transition, and everyone's retirement is going to be different. The reality of retirement is that it doesn't have to be a sudden shock to the system. The more time you give it, the more likely you are to enter on your terms. And to help with that, as I mentioned earlier, I've created a free retirement assessment review where you can speak directly with me about your situation. It's complimentary, and on the call, we'll step through your exact situation and make sure that you get complete clarity on what your next steps are so that you can make sure to take your best step forward. So if you're interested in that, click the link in the description where you can book a call. And thanks for watching.